A Toronto police report released yesterday confirms what many have said for a long time. Black and other people of color are unfairly targeted by police. For instance, a Black person is 2.3 times more likely to have police point a gun at them than a white person. 2.3 times. The police chief has apologized. What's your reaction to these findings?
Thank you for stating what we've already known. I mean, let's just be real. Thank you for doing another report, more data. The one thing I do want to point out was a memo was sent out last week, and it was sent internally. And it says the note cautions that June 15th will be a challenging day for members because of the release of the findings. That day and the weeks that follow will be challenging as we share and discuss to the extent which systemic racism has led to differential treatment of racial groups by our service, the memo reads. It'll be difficult for you, our members, as it will lead some people to question the hard work you do every day. I like to issue my own memo to the Black community on June 15th, yesterday. The day and the weeks that follow will be challenging for us as we will continue to discuss to the extent in which systemic racism has continued to affect and to harm us. Data could come out, photos could come out, videos could come out, apologies could come out. Where is the change? Where is the change? You could continuously do all these reports and say, oh yes, look at the numbers. But our lives show, those are numbers that you're not mentioning. Our children who are watching themselves being murdered on television, all these things continue to happen. We have these press conferences, but where is the change? So take that memo and do something with it.
Yes. I mean, this is why so many people are calling to defund the police. And I know lots of people hear that and they get extremely triggered by it. And I'll be honest, the first time I heard it, which now probably was several years ago, I was kind of like, whoa, wait, I mean, that seems a bit extreme. But as I've learned and listened and become more understanding, and again, having this data that anyone already knew, how much money was spent to tell a story that Black and Indigenous people have been telling in this country for ever.
Do they believe us now?
I mean, this is the question. And
Okay.
what is going to happen next? So this piece about defund the police, I mean, if anyone is actually listening and researching, it's about providing alternatives to police services. It is about knowing and prioritizing more effective methods of providing safety and security to the communities that need it the most. And it's about also taking money and putting them into social support and public health, things that will also help communities. And, you know, I think that there is something to this idea that sometimes you need to burn something down, to blow something up, to start from ground zero and start building up again, because what is at the core of something cannot be fixed on its own. And I think we really need to start having those hard conversations without people becoming angry.
In philosophical terms, that's reform versus revolution. Sometimes you can't reform something,
That's right.
It needs a revolution.
Well, I'm going to quote Cyrus Marcus Ware, who's a longtime friend of the show. And Cyrus was yesterday speaking on a lot of outlets, and they said something that really struck me. Cyrus said, you know, what organization in the world do you know that does such a poor job at something? Like their very job, they're doing it not well in many respects. This is a one way, racism, systemic racism in policing. And yet will very likely request and receive more money for doing a bad job, not get that money taken away. And Cyrus was saying that in response to the fact that at the end of the press conference yesterday, the Toronto police chief said, we will be looking for more funding to be able to address the issues of systemic racism. So it seems so counterintuitive when you put it that way. If you or I did our jobs badly forever, why would we deserve more money to try to fix something, as you said, Cynthia, that it's not that it just broke overnight. Again, Cyrus points out, and anybody who wants to pick up a book will know, the history of policing in this country, and in fact, North America, but I'll talk about Canada and Ontario specifically. The history it was built on the foundation of racism. So you cannot say, well, we're going to fix the system. It was never meant for people of color in the first place.
Well, that's why also, like, the rollout of the data was problematic, as you articulated. And even in the press conference, the understanding of the data is problematic because Chief Raymer said that he was like, we won't be focusing on individual acts of racism. Does that make sense to you? So apparently there are instances of misconduct and other ways for the force to address them, and he added that overt racism will never be tolerated. If you're confused by that, so was Notisha Massaquoi, an assistant professor at the Department of Health and Society at the University of Toronto. And they said that systemic racism is created by racist people. So how do you separate a system from the people who uphold the system?
Right.
This tells me that even though they have the data, they don't understand what to do with it.
No.
It's one thing to get the research. Everybody understands science. Then what do you do with the research, with the data? They don't know. And even in this report, the report found that Toronto police have misused race-based data in the past. So you went out and did all this research, you got the results, you announced the research, you didn't really understand the research, and now you want more money to go and fix the data that you just got. That's why there's so much
And what's going to
distrust.
happen in between? What's going to happen in between?
More people will die.
More people will die.
Yes.
But let's do another report. Let's do more research.
Yeah.
And then reach what conclusion?
I mean, honestly, I think that there are people like you who've understood for years. Now people who are coming around to this research, for instance, who may not have known and are wrestling with this defund the police thing. And now the questions for them that I would ask is, if you're not comfortable with defund the police, are you comfortable with people having data, getting more money when they don't understand the data, and in the past, they didn't use the data properly?
There
Think
are
about
38
that.
recommendations. I mean, I will say this, if we want to talk about what you said right off the top, which is like, what's next? So you have information, good for you. But there are 38 recommendations in this report. The question will be, will we stay as hot on this as we are today to follow up with the powers that be to see if they are implementing any of the 38 recommendations? Let's see. That's the thing. We can care today, but does the rest of the city, the province, care tomorrow and the next day when maybe recommendations, everyone's, oh, that's nice.
Right.
And put down the piece of paper.
And I think what's frustrating as a Black person is that there's going to be people who are watching, who are going to leave their comments in the comments section, who are going to go, okay, yeah, what? Yeah, what with this data? Like, why do we need all of these reports to prove what we've been saying for years? Our lives is data. Our stories is data. That's all a part of it. And yet, so there are still people who are going to go, and what? It's not a big deal. That's not a problem. The police are out here serving and protecting. They're doing their job. But at the same time, they are causing harm, and they need to be held accountable. So if you're only looking at one side of the story and saying we have to protect the officers, they're doing their job, but a whole community, several communities, are constantly being targeted, and you see nothing wrong with that, you need to check yourself. You need to check yourself.
I was very disheartened. I was listening to morning radio, and there was a very prominent Toronto host, I believe he's a white male, who then said in response to this report, well, isn't there just more disproportionate violence in Black communities?
I knew someone was going to say,
Right?
I knew
Like-
somebody was going to say that.
Yeah.
I knew somebody was going to say that. We were literally talking about it just before we went on air, and I go, there's going to be somebody who pulls the, but there's Black on Black violence card. Okay, you see? I need to, I need to breathe.
Yeah. And I think that's the challenging part, is people who think that you can isolate racism to a system. When the entire system for all people of color is broken, it's going to be targeting all of the systems. And I think that it's a big, I get it, it's big, it's difficult. It's supposed to be big and difficult. Lives are on the line. Yeah. Of course it's supposed to be difficult. I saw an interview today with a Toronto lawyer, a Black man, and he has been profiling his own story, being stopped by police over the last several years, over 30 times. And he said because he's a lawyer and he has the language, it didn't escalate to what could have been a very, very different outcome. And he says, but why do I have to be a lawyer as a Black man to survive an encounter with police in my city? And I just sit there and think, if you're not listening to these stories, then whose stories are you listening to? You know, listen, we do want to hear from you on this. Of course, it's complicated. We are not shying away from it here. We will continue to talk about it. We want to make sure we hear you and your comments as well. So please let us know what you think.